Your aim is the real problem, you're not ranking up, and let me tell you why. I'm going to cover everything you need to know about aim in this video, and it's going to be split into 3 parts. Beginner, which is going to cover aim mechanics from iron to silver, intermediate covers gold to diamond, and expert covering diamond to immortal. Afterwards, I'll be giving aim routines depending on where you place in these 3 categories to improve your aim. So feel free to skip around depending on your rank, but be careful, because a lot of these mechanics build upon each other, and if you don't get the fundamentals right, you'll hit a plateau. Beginner. Let's start with the fundamentals. Valorant skill can essentially be split into 2 parts, aim and brain. So if you can't aim, half of your skill is lacking. Quick disclaimer, most people default to try and improve aim instead of brain because it's easier. Do not make this mistake. First thing to get right is your sensitivity. There is no perfect sensitivity, so don't search for one. The closest you can get to a perfect sensitivity is going to be one that is tailored for you. So don't copy others, but you might wonder where to start. A good range to be in is in between 100 to 400 EDPI, which is just your mouse DPI times your in-game sensitivity. Most pros land in this range, so it's a good place to start. And the reason why low EDPI is beneficial is because in Valorant you do most of your aiming with movement and crosshair placement, and just micro adjust to compensate. So let's cover crosshair placement and movement before we combine all of these things. So what is crosshair placement and why is it important? As the name suggests, it's where you place your crosshair. Good crosshair placement is when you keep it at head height and when you follow corners. It's also when you hold angles. At long range, you want to hold the angle closer and further away when close. The reason why you want to hold the crosshair further away when close is because opponents move faster across your screen, giving you less time to react, and it's the opposite when standing far away, enabling you to hold a bit tighter. Now let's cover movement. Peeking opponents with your W key doesn't work because it makes you an insanely easy target, so instead you should use your A and D keys to peek. Do not use W plus A and D, do not do these like diagonal peeks. The reason why peeking with only A and D keys are good is because it's the fastest peek, making you a harder target to shoot. Now you know everything you should do to engage in a fight in the correct way, but now I'm going to cover how to fight correctly. Ideally you want a fight to go like this. See enemy, adjust to head, stop and shoot. You don't want to see enemy, stop and shoot, adjust to head. This can easily become a bad habit, which I see a lot of people do, and do not make this mistake. So these are the fundamentals to aiming in Valorant, and when you got this down, you're going to want to move on to the next stage. Intermediate. Let's start with gun mechanics. It's really simple but hard to apply. You want to spray at close range, burst and strafe mid-range, and tap/burst long range. This is where crouching comes into the picture as well. Crouching isn't necessarily bad if done right. Crouching in close range engagements is really strong because you throw off your enemy's crosshair placement by a lot. But this barely works at long range or in lower elos because people don't have good crosshair placement. If you're in these ranks, you need to perfect the peek. First off, you need to understand how angles work. You want to stand as far away from the angle as possible, enabling you to see the enemy first. The closer you are, the less you see and therefore see the enemy later. If you combine this with a technique I call slicing the cake, you'll win way more gunfights. When clearing an area, you want to take short peeks to clear the area bit by bit. This is good because of 2 reasons. 1, you give yourself a higher chance of having correct crosshair placement, and 2, you lower the chances of landing in a 2v1 or a 3v1. By isolating angles, you can turn fights into 2 1v1s instead of a 2v1. By slicing the cake, you also don't make any noise, if done correctly, enabling you to surprise your enemy. But let's be real, it's impossible to always hit those first shots, and a lot of times your enemy also misses the first few shots, which drags out the fight. So in order to convert to these longer fights, you need to make yourself a harder target to hit. And this is where strafing comes into the picture. Ideally you want to burst 2 to 3 shots and strafe. If you hit a shot, you can commit to a spray since they're slowed, granted you're in a good range to spray. It's also important to note that you don't want to be predictable with your strafing or making super short strafes. You want to throw off your opponent's aim as much as possible, so don't make yourself an easy target to hit by just strafing in one direction or making really short strafes, because that's easy to readjust and hit your head. Aim to make your strafes unpredictable. If you master all of these principles as well as the previously mentioned ones, you'll be able to climb to diamond in no time. But once you're in diamond, things get a little more complicated. Now onto the expert stage. First, let's discuss pre-aiming. Now you have a good understanding of what good angles are, and you should have some game sense as well, meaning you know common good angles. To fight these angles, you need to understand how to pre-aim. Pre-aiming is when you line up your crosshair with the spot you're trying to clear so that you don't need to do any aiming and you can just do the aiming with your movement, making this very consistent. Another important thing to learn is resetting aim. When clearing wide areas, you might end up with your wrist in an uncomfortable position, so therefore you need to reset your aim to give yourself a good range of motion and make aiming as easy as possible. Last, we got dead zoning. This is very situational and isn't necessary to learn. Dead zoning is when you're strafing and change direction. When doing this, there is a so-called dead zone, where you're accurate and can shoot, giving the illusion that you never stop, making you an extremely hard target to hit. Dead zoning is mostly useful when your enemy has committed to a spray and you can get an easy tap whilst being agile. The fun part, aim routines. First off, I want to say that I'm not claiming that these aim routines are the best in any way. It's just the routines I would recommend myself if I were in these ranks. Beginner aim routine. You're still new to the game and you just need more repetitions. Don't try any fancy stuff, stick to the basics and build a strong foundation. Therefore, the routine is very simple. First section is focused on building good habits of focusing on accuracy over speed. Therefore, start off doing 3 easy bots. Then move on to 3 medium. And afterwards do 5 minutes of tracking. If you can't stay on target or you keep over flicking and under flicking, then you need to change the sensitivity, and that's fine. Second part is going to be DMs, and I want you to specifically focus on crosshair placement. This takes time and repetition. Learn where head height is on the different maps and practice moving around the map and peeking with your A and D keys whilst engaging in fights like previously mentioned. See enemy, adjust the head, stop and shoot, not the other way around. This will build a good foundation, habit, aim and movement wise. That'll help you later down the road. Intermediate aim routine. Now we get to some more advanced mechanics while still building upon the fundamentals. First off, it's important to get the gun mechanics down and use our movement to our advantage. Therefore, let's start with 5 minutes of bursting whilst strafing. Do not be lazy with the strafes, mix it up, do some longer strafes and some shorter ones. Afterwards, do 5 minutes spraying and spray transfer. Try mixing it up with a Vandal and Phantom so you learn both. Then go on to 5 minutes of tracking and the target switching, which looks like this. You'll quickly notice if your sensitivity is too high or too low if you can't stay on target whilst moving, and that's fine. Just readjust your sensitivity. Now we move on to 3 DMs whilst keeping clean crosshair placement, not too close and not too far away from corners. But at the same time, practice your gun mechanics. Use the best option depending on the range. Spray close range, and if you're really close you can even crouch. Mid-range, burst and strafe, and long range, burst and tap while strafing. Expert aim routine. Now we arrive at my current routine and how I practice. At this point it's just about enforcing good habits and improving the fundamentals whilst having learned all possible mechanics. 5 minutes of... I start off with 5 minutes of vertical bots, where I just stand on a sage wall and practice my horizontal and vertical aim. Then I do 5 minutes of strafing and bursting, keeping my strafes unpredictable. Then I do 5 minutes tracking and target switching. And here's an optional one, I do it sometimes, not always. 5 minutes of dead zone practice. Then I jump into 3 DMs. I focus on doing all of the previously mentioned fundamentals, but increasing the speed without building bad habits. So for anyone out there thinking you need some insane aim routine to reach the high ranks, you don't. The real is that you just need to work on the fundamentals. It's nothing flashy, but it's what has worked for me. training in-game to work on all things at the same time. I'm no aim god, and I think aim trainers like Kovacs and aim labs are good, but I firmly believe that it is not the fastest way to improve in-game aim mechanics. I also want to say that none of these aim routines are flashy and there's no secret, and most of you have probably seen pretty similar aim routines before, and that's because that's what works. It's the fundamentals, it's the boring part, it's the thing no one wants to focus on, but it's the real thing that's going to help you. And doing some insane Kovacs routine or aim labs routine is not what's gonna help you. It's the fundamentals, and it's boring, it's not flashy, it is what it is, but trust me, this is what you need to be working on in reality. But perfect aim doesn't matter unless you can apply it consistently, and that's why I've made a video that'll teach you the secret to consistency.